The research vessel, Northern Star, hung against the backdrop of stars, its white hull gleaming in the light of a distant sun. Inside the ship, most of the crew slept peacefully as they drifted through the empty region between star systems. Only a skeleton crew maintained watch on the bridge, their faces lit by the soft blue glow of monitoring screens. Dr. Alan Morris couldn't sleep. Something about the data from yesterday's scans kept his mind racing. He sat at his small desk, eyes tired, but alert, reviewing the unusual energy patterns they had detected. As the ship's lead xenolinguist, he had studied every known form of alien communication, but these patterns seemed different, more urgent somehow. His computer terminal suddenly lit up with an alert. Alan frowned and tapped the screen to open the notification. A new signal was coming through on frequencies normally reserved for emergency broadcasts. "Computer, analyze and translate incoming signal," he ordered, reaching for the coffee mug beside him. The computer processed the request, and moments later, a series of symbols appeared on screen alongside their rough translations. Alan's eyes widened. He set down his mug with a sharp click and reached for the ship's internal communication system. "Captain Wells to the communication bay, priority 1, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through him. "We're receiving a distress call." Within minutes, Captain Gregory Wells strode into the room, his uniform hastily pulled on, dark hair still mussed from sleep. His weathered face showed concern rather than annoyance at being woken. "What have we got, Morris?" he asked. "Sir, we're picking up a signal unlike anything in our databases," Alan explained, pointing to the screen. "It's being broadcast on emergency channels across multiple frequencies. Whoever sent this wanted to make sure someone heard it." First Officer Susan Baker arrived next, followed by Navigation Officer Lisa Martin and Ship's Security Chief Ben Foster. They gathered around Alan's workstation as he continued to work on the translation. "It's definitely a language structure," Alan said, "but not one we've encountered before. The computer is making comparisons with known linguistic patterns." He paused as new text appeared on his screen. "Got it. The translation isn't perfect, but the message is clear enough." He pressed a button, and a voice filled the room. Clearly synthetic, but carrying unmistakable notes of fear and desperation. "This is the Calrian Confederation broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Our home system is under attack by the Dranari Empire. We are a peaceful civilization with limited military capabilities. To any spacefaring races who value life and freedom, we beg for assistance. Coordinates follow. Please help us, we cannot hold out much longer." The message repeated, followed by a string of navigational data. The room fell silent as the crew processed what they had just heard. "Can we verify this?" Wells asked finally. Lisa moved to a nearby console and input the coordinates. A star map appeared, showing a system 27 light-years from their current position. "It's a G-type star with 14 planets," she reported. "Our deep space scans have detected signs of advanced civilization there, but we've never made direct contact." "And the attackers?" Wells questioned. Ben stepped forward, his face grim. "The Dranari are unknown to us, Captain, but if they're mounting a full-scale invasion, they must have significant military technology." Susan shook her head. "This could be a trap, sir, or some kind of misunderstanding. We don't know enough about either species to justify involvement." "Captain." Wells didn't respond immediately. He walked to the viewport and gazed out at the stars, hands clasped behind his back. The crew watched him, waiting. They all knew what was at stake. In the 15 years since humans had developed faster-than-light travel, they had maintained a careful policy of observation and limited contact with alien civilizations. Direct intervention in an interstellar conflict would change everything. "How many people live in the Calrian system based on our scans?" Wells asked quietly. Lisa checked her data. "Conservative estimate puts their population at 9 billion, sir." Wells turned back to face his crew. "We're not equipped to handle this alone. Send the full message and all data to Earth Command, priority 1. Request immediate instructions." Alan nodded and began preparing the transmission. As he worked, the message from the Calrians played once more. The desperation in the artificial voice seemed even more pronounced now. "Sir," Ben said, "by the time we get orders and Earth can organize any kind of response." He didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room understood the implications of light-speed communication delays, even with their advanced technology. "We'll set course for the edge of the Calrian system," Wells decided. "Close enough to gather intelligence but not to engage. I want detailed scans of both forces, military assessments, and cultural data on both species. If Earth decides to help, they'll need every scrap of information we can provide." Susan nodded. "I'll wake the rest of the crew and prepare for course change." "Do it," Wells ordered. "And maintain communication silence except for coded transmissions to Earth Command. If there's a hostile force out there with superior technology, I don't want them detecting us prematurely." As the officers dispersed to their duties, Alan remained at his station, continuing to refine the translation of the Calrian message. He found additional data packets embedded within the signal, images and videos showing the attack in progress. He watched in horror as massive ships rained destruction on populated worlds, as civilians fled through burning cities. "Captain," he called out as Wells was leaving, "you should see this." Wells returned and stood silently beside him watching the footage. His jaw tightened. "Make sure Earth Command gets every frame of this," he said finally. "The people back home need to understand exactly what's happening out here." As the Northern Star changed course and accelerated toward the Calrian system, the message continued to play throughout the ship, reaching every crew member. By morning, everyone aboard knew what they might be facing. In his personal log that night, Captain Wells recorded a simple entry. "Today we received a call for help from the stars. How humanity answers will define us for generations to come. I hope we choose wisely." The message from the Northern Star reached Earth 12 hours later. Within minutes, it was being reviewed by military and civilian leaders in emergency session. By the end of the day, humanity would make a decision that would forever change its place in the galaxy. The United Nations Space Coalition headquarters in Geneva buzzed with activity unlike anything seen in years. Representatives from all Earth nations arrived by the hour, their faces grave as they were briefed on the situation unfolding 27 light-years away. Security was tight, with armed guards at every entrance and military vehicles lining the streets outside. Inside the main chamber, the room fell silent as Defense Secretary Paul Johnson stepped up to the podium. The large screens behind him displayed images from the Northern Star's scans, burning cities, massive warships, and desperate civilians fleeing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnson began, his voice steady but solemn, "what you are seeing is happening right now to a civilization known as the Calrians. Our research vessel, Northern Star, intercepted their distress call 3 days ago and has since gathered this intelligence from the edge of their system." He paused to let the images sink in before continuing. "We have confirmed the Calrian signal is genuine. Long-range probes detect massive energy signatures consistent with an invasion fleet. The aggressors call themselves the Drenari Empire. From what we can tell, they are a highly militaristic species with technology slightly more advanced than our own." Murmurs filled the room as representatives leaned toward each other, whispering urgently. The Brazilian ambassador stood. "What do the Calrians want from us exactly?" she asked. Johnson nodded to a woman sitting in the front row. "Admiral Diane Powell, head of Earth's combined fleet, will address the tactical situation." Admiral Powell moved to the podium with the confident stride of someone used to command. She touched a control, and the screens changed to show military projections and comparative force assessments. "The Calrians are asking for military intervention," she explained. "Their own defense forces are substantial but outmatched. The Drenari outnumber them 10-1 and possess superior firepower." She brought up a new set of images showing Earth's available military vessels. "If we commit to this action, I must be clear. There is no guarantee of victory. We would be facing an unknown enemy with limited intelligence on their capabilities. We would be risking not just the lives of our service members, but potentially the safety of Earth itself." The room erupted into heated debate. The Chinese representative stood, his expression stern. "This is not our fight," he declared. "Humanity has only recently ventured beyond our solar system. We cannot risk everything for aliens we have never even met. Others quickly rose to speak. The Kenyan ambassador shook her head firmly. If we ignore this call for help, what does that say about us as a species? Would we stand by and watch a genocide if it happened on Earth? Why should distance make a moral difference? For 3 days, the debate raged. Military experts presented scenarios. Scientists shared what little they knew about both alien species. Economic advisors warned about the cost of war preparations. Ethics committees argued about the moral obligations to other sentient beings. Outside the building, crowds gathered. Some held signs reading "Earth First," while others countered with "Humanity stands with all life." News channels broadcast continuous coverage as people everywhere wondered, what would Earth do? On the 4th day, President Eric Sanchez entered the chamber. The room immediately fell silent as he took the podium, his normally cheerful face now serious and determined. "I have listened to all arguments," he began. "I have weighed the risks against our conscience. I have consulted with military leaders, scientists, ethicists, and representatives from every nation." He paused, looking around the room at the faces watching him intently. Throughout human history, we've learned one painful lesson over and over. Evil triumphs when good people stand by and do nothing. From the darkest chapters of our past, we know the cost of inaction in the face of aggression. Sanchez tapped a control, and the screen showed images of the Calrian people, humanoid but clearly alien, with blue-tinted skin and large eyes. They looked back at the camera with the universal expressions of fear and hope that needed no translation. These beings reached out across the stars, not knowing if anyone would answer. They placed their trust in the possibility that somewhere, someone would care enough to help. His voice grew stronger, more resolved. "I say we will not be bystanders to genocide even among the stars. We will not turn away when innocent lives are threatened, regardless of what planet those lives call home." A hush fell over the room as the weight of his words settled on everyone present. "I am authorizing full military intervention on behalf of the Calrian people. Earth will answer their call." The announcement sent shockwaves through the chamber. Some representatives stood and applauded while others remained seated, their expressions troubled. But the decision was made. Earth would go to war for the first time beyond its solar system. Within hours, the First War Council convened. Admiral Powell assembled her top commanders in a secure underground facility beneath the Geneva headquarters. Scientists, strategists, and intelligence officers worked together around the clock, poring over the data from the Northern Star. "The Drenari have numbers and firepower," Powell said, standing before a holographic display of the Calrian system. "But they've never encountered humans before. They don't know how we think or how we fight." General Frank Martinez, commander of Earth's Marine Forces, studied the terrain maps of the main Calrian worlds. "We can't match them ship for ship," he noted, "but we don't have to. If we can relieve key strategic positions on the ground while disrupting their fleet formations in space, we can buy the Calrians time to evacuate civilians and regroup their forces." Dr. Sophia Wright, the leading xenobiologist, pointed to scans of Drenari physiology. "Their sensory systems are different from both humans and Calrians," she explained. "They have enhanced vision in ultraviolet ranges but poor perception of red spectrum light. Their hearing is acute but primarily in higher frequencies than humans can produce. We can use these differences to our advantage." As the planning continued, Admiral Powell received word that Captain Wells and the Northern Star had made brief, covert contact with a Calrian resistance group. Captain Wells reports that the Calrians are still holding out in several defensive positions, she informed the council. "They've managed to establish an underground network across 3 planets. If we can reach them in time, they can provide crucial ground support." President Sanchez joined the council for its final session. He listened silently as the commanders presented their plan, a bold, multi-pronged attack that would require perfect coordination in every available ship. "This plan," he said when they finished, "it's not just about sending aid or troops. This is all in." Admiral Powell nodded gravely. "The Drenari need to understand immediately that attacking Earth's allies carries severe consequences. Anything less than our full force would be seen as weakness." Sanchez looked at each face around the table, then nodded once. Make it happen. Earth goes to war. As the council dispersed to begin implementing the plan, a simple message was sent. To the Northern Star, help is coming, hold the line. Across Earth, citizens watched as shipyards lit up and military bases surged with activity. Humanity prepared for its first interstellar war, united in purpose if not in unanimity of opinion. The decision had been made, for better or worse. Earth would answer with fury. The red lights of warning systems flashed across Earth's night side, visible from space as cities and industrial centers worked around the clock. 3 weeks had passed since President Sanchez's announcement, and humanity had transformed itself, with a speed that shocked even the most optimistic military planners. Jack Miller stood on the observation deck of the Mars orbital shipyard, watching as massive robotic arms assembled the hull of the newly commissioned battleship Defiance. As chief engineer of the facility, he had overseen the construction of scientific vessels and exploration ships for years, but nothing like this. "How much longer?" asked Admiral Powell, who had arrived from Earth that morning to inspect progress. Jack consulted his tablet. 16 hours until she's ready for systems check. We've been working triple shifts." Powell nodded, her eyes fixed on the enormous vessel taking shape before them. The Defiance would be the first of 50 new warships, each incorporating technology that had been theoretical just months ago. "You've done the impossible, Miller," she said quietly. Jack shook his head. "We just did what needed doing, Admiral, same as everyone else." What he didn't mention was the strain. How his workers pushed themselves to exhaustion. How materials were being shipped in from asteroid mining operations at twice their normal rate. How every available manufacturing facility in the solar system had shifted to war production. "The weapons systems?" Powell asked. "Better than the designs called for," Jack replied. "The new railguns can fire at 30% of light speed. The energy shields will hold against anything we've been able to simulate." Powell finally turned to look at him. "And you're sure they'll work against Drenari weapons?" Jack hesitated. "As sure as we can be without having faced them directly." That was the problem that haunted everyone involved in the war preparations. For all their frantic work, they were preparing to fight an enemy they had never encountered. Meanwhile, on Earth's moon, the vacuum-sealed training chamber echoed with the sounds of boots on metal and the sharp commands of drill instructors. Major Olivia Clark walked between rows of Marines in full combat gear, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Again," she ordered, and watched as the soldiers repeated the complex maneuver, a coordinated assault pattern designed specifically for the unusual gravity and terrain they would face on Calrian worlds. "Martinez, your left flank is exposed," she barked. "Wong, tighten that formation. If this were real, you'd both be dead." The soldiers adjusted immediately, their faces serious beneath helmet visors. They had been training for 18 hours straight, but none complained. They had all seen the footage from the Northern Star, had all watched the Drenari ships bombarding civilian centers. Colonel Frank Harris approached from the observation booth, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. "How are they doing?" he asked, quietly. Olivia watched the unit complete another perfect maneuver before answering. "They're ready, or as ready as we can make them without actual combat experience against the Drenari." Harris nodded. "The first transport ships leave tomorrow. Your unit will be on the third wave departing in 72 hours. Olivia felt her heart rate increase, but kept her expression neutral. "We'll be ready, sir." She turned back to her troops, raising her voice. "Listen up, the Calrians are counting on us. The Drenari have never faced humans in combat, and we're going to make sure they regret the day they do." A cheer rose from the assembled Marines, their determination echoing in the chamber. In laboratories across Earth, scientists worked with equal intensity. At the Advanced Weapons Research Facility in Colorado, Dr. Nathan Ross led teams analyzing what little data they had on Drenari technology. The lab hadn't seen daylight in days, with researchers sleeping on cots between shifts. "Their shields operate on a frequency modulation we can exploit," Nathan explained to a group of military officers gathered around a holographic display. "And their weapons, while powerful, have a recharge cycle we can time our attacks around." Captain Linda Wright, a tactical specialist, studied the display with narrowed eyes. "You're certain of this?" Nathan ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "As certain as we can be from sensor readings. The Northern Star captured detailed scans during a Drenari attack on the third Calrian planet." "And how do we use this information?" asked another officer. Nathan tapped the display, bringing up a new set of schematics. "We've developed these countermeasures. If we time our attacks to hit during their recharge cycle and modulate our shield frequencies to match their weapons output, we can reduce damage by up to 60%. The officers exchanged glances. A 60% reduction still meant 40% of the Drenari firepower would get through. "It's better than nothing," Linda said finally. "Get these modifications to the fleet immediately." Across the solar system, similar scenes played out as humanity prepared for war with singular focus. Communication relays were strengthened to maintain contact across the vast distance. Supply chains were established to support a prolonged campaign. Medical facilities expanded their capacity and researched treatment protocols for potential alien diseases and injuries. The scope of the mobilization was unprecedented. Nations that had been rivals for centuries now worked together, pooling resources and expertise. Civilian industries converted to military production without hesitation. Universities turned their research facilities over to weapon development and tactical analysis. In orbit above Earth, the first completed warships gathered into formation. The Defiance, now fully operational, took its position as the flagship of the Earth fleet. Its captain, Chris Wilson, who had been promoted to admiral specifically for this mission, stood on the bridge and watched as more ships joined the assembly point each hour. His communications officer turned from her station. "Sir, all ships report. Ready. Final vessel count stands at 117 combat-ready ships and 32 support vessels." Admiral Wilson nodded. It wasn't as many as he would have liked, but it would have to be enough. The latest reports from the Northern Star indicated that the Calrians were losing ground daily. There was no more time to prepare. He opened a channel to address the combined fleet crews. His words would reach every ship, from the massive Defiance to the smallest support craft. "Men and women of Earth's first interstellar fleet," he began, his voice steady. "We are about to embark on a mission unlike any in human history. We will travel farther and fight harder than any humans before us." He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew, seeing the same mixture of determination and tension that he felt himself. "We go to defend a people we have never met, against an enemy we have never faced. Some would call this madness. I call it humanity at its finest. Throughout our history, we have learned to stand against tyranny wherever we find." And the ship's engines began to power up, a low hum building throughout the fleet. "Remember, we fight not just for the Calrians. We fight to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. We fight to prove that distance and difference do not matter when innocent lives are at stake." Wilson gave the final command, and the massive fleet began to move away from Earth, accelerating toward the jump point where they would engage their faster-than-light drives. The Calrians called for help, and Earth has answered. Now let's make sure the Drenari understand exactly what that means. As the fleet disappeared into the darkness of space, a quiet fell over Earth. The frantic activity of the past week slowed as people returned to their homes, their work complete for now. In living rooms and public squares, they gathered around screens to watch the fleet's departure. Now all they could do was wait and hope that humanity's first interstellar war would not be its last. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Calrian system. The massive ships slowed to normal space, their engines glowing against the darkness. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Wilson stared at the main view screen in grim silence. The scene before them was worse than their intelligence had suggested. Orbital platforms around several planets lay in ruins. The debris of destroyed ships formed glittering clouds in space. On the third planet, the Calrian homeworld, fires were visible even from orbit, huge sections of cities burning under bombardment. "Status." "Report," Wilson ordered, his voice tight. "Sensors detect 23 major Drenari warships in the system, sir," the tactical officer replied, "plus approximately 60 smaller combat vessels. The remaining Calrian ships, just 11 of them, are in defensive formation around their homeworld. Wilson studied the tactical display. Even with 117 human ships, the battle would not be easy. The Drenari vessels were larger, their weapons more powerful according to the scans. "Open a channel to the Calrian defenders," he ordered. Moments later, a face appeared on the view screen, clearly alien, with blue-tinted skin, large eyes, and a ridge of small spines where hair would be on a human. The Calrian commander looked exhausted, but his eyes widened at the sight of humans. "This is Admiral Chris Wilson of the Earth Fleet," Wilson said clearly. "We received your distress call. We're here to help." The Calrian seemed unable to speak for a moment. When he did, his words came through the translator with a slight delay. "Admiral, we had almost lost hope. We are the last line of defense for our homeworld. The Drenari have destroyed most of our fleet." "Hold your position," Wilson told him. "We're coming in." Before the fleet could advance, a new signal came through, this one from a massive vessel at the center of the Drenari formation. The face that appeared on screen was nothing like the Calrians. The Drenari had gray, scaled skin with 4 yellow, eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Sharp teeth showed when it spoke. "Unidentified fleet, this conflict does not concern you," the Drenari commander said, its voice a harsh rasp even through the translator. "The Calrian worlds are claimed by the Drenari Empire. Retreat immediately or be destroyed." Wilson stood from his chair, facing the screen directly. "I am Admiral Wilson of the United Fleet of Earth. We stand with the Calrians. Your unprovoked attack on a peaceful civilization ends today." He cut the transmission before the Drenari could respond, and turned to his bridge crew. "Battle stations. Deploy the fleet according to Plan Alpha." Throughout the human ships, crews rushed to their positions. Weapon systems came online, shields powered up to maximum strength. The fleet began to move in perfect formation. Smaller, faster ships taking the lead while the larger battleships formed a second line. The Drenari, clearly surprised by the humans' quick approach, scrambled to reposition their forces. They had expected either a retreat or perhaps a brief negotiation. Instead, they faced an immediate attack. Lieutenant Kevin Adams sat in the cockpit of his strike craft, Swift Justice, watching as the launch bay doors opened. Around him, 20 other pilots prepared for takeoff. As squadron leader, he would guide them through the coming battle. "Strike Team Delta, prepare for launch," came the order through his headset. "Target the enemy's left flank. Their engines are vulnerable to your specialized warheads." Kevin activated his communication channel. "Copy that. Delta Squad is ready." He switched to his squadron frequency. "All right, people, you heard the orders. We hit their engines hard and fast. Remember your training." The launch signal flashed green, and Kevin's fighter shot forward into space, followed closely by the rest of his squadron. They flew in tight formation toward the nearest group of Drenari ships, which were already turning to meet the human fleets. "Advance. Enemy fighters approaching," his co-pilot warned. 30 seconds to engagement." Kevin took a deep breath, hands steady on the controls. "Execute pattern Delta on my mark." As the two forces met, space lit up with weapons fire. The Drenari fighters were larger and more heavily armed, but the human craft were faster and more maneuverable. Kevin's squadron wove through the enemy formation, dodging energy blasts while closing in on their primary targets, the engines of the Drenari battlecruisers. "Now," Kevin ordered. His pilots released their specialized warheads, which attached to Drenari engine casings before detonating. The explosions ripped through the enemy ship's propulsion systems, leaving 3 massive cruisers drifting helplessly. Meanwhile, the main fleets engaged in the first full-scale battle between humans and the Drenari. The alien ships fired powerful energy weapons that strained human shields to their limits. But the Earth vessels responded with precisely timed volleys that exploited the recharge cycle of Drenari weapon systems, just as Dr. Ross had predicted. On the Defiance, Admiral Wilson watched the battle unfold with intense focus. "Status report," he demanded. "We've lost 4 ships, sir," his tactical officer replied. "The Drenari have lost 7, with 3 more crippled." Our shields are holding at 62% across the fleet. Wilson nodded. The human ships were employing tactics the Drenari had never seen. Complex formations that changed constantly, electronic warfare that confused Drenari targeting systems, and hit-and-run, attacks that negated the enemy's numerical advantage. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. Major Clark's Marines have landed successfully and linked up with Calrian ground forces." On the Calrian homeworld, Major Olivia Clark led her Marines through the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city. Drenari ground troops had established control points throughout the urban area and were systematically destroying both resistance fighters and civilians. "Forward position spotted," Olivia's scout reported, pointing to a Drenari bunker ahead. Olivia studied the enemy position through her binoculars. The bunker was heavily reinforced, with energy cannons that could tear through her troops in seconds. "Standard. Approach won't work," she muttered, then turned to the Calrian fighters who had joined her unit. "Is there another way around?" The Calrian leader, a battle-scarred veteran named Carex, nodded. "Underground transit tunnels. We can come up behind them." Olivia nodded. "Show us." The mixed human Calrian force moved through the dark tunnels, emerging behind the Drenari position. The aliens were completely focused on the road ahead, never expecting an attack from the rear. "Fire," Olivia ordered, and her Marines unleashed a barrage that overwhelmed the Drenari troops before they could turn their weapons. As the battle continued, the Calrians watched in amazement as humans charged positions that seemed impregnable, using terrain and covering fire with a ferocity the methodical Drenari couldn't match. Where Drenari troops advanced in orderly lines, humans used guerrilla tactics, striking quickly, disappearing, then striking again from an unexpected direction. By the third day of battle, the tide had turned decisively. In space, the human fleet had destroyed or disabled more than half the Drenari ships. On the ground, Major Clark's Marines had secured the main Calrian cities and pushed the invaders back to their landing zones. The Drenari commander, facing defeat for perhaps the first time in his career, sent a communication to the Defiant's human leader. He began, his voice less confident than before. "We request terms for the cessation of hostilities." Admiral Wilson allowed himself a small smile before responding. "Unconditional withdrawal from all Calrian worlds. Return of all prisoners. Reparations for the damage you've caused." The Drenari commander's 4 yellow eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. "You are in no position to demand such terms. We still have substantial forces." "Look again," Wilson replied calmly. As if on cue, a second human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, the reinforcements Wilson had been waiting for. Faced with fresh enemy forces when his own troops were exhausted, the Drenari commander had no choice. "We will withdraw," he said finally. But before ending the transmission, he added a question that revealed his confusion. "What manner of species fights with such intensity?" Wilson's answer was simple. "We're human, and we answer when called." 1 month after the battle, the Calrian capital city of Vestra was still being rebuilt. Construction crews worked day and night, clearing rubble and raising new structures where the Drenari bombardment had left only ruins. But amid the ongoing recovery, the city center had been prepared for an important ceremony. Captain Alan Morris of the Northern Star, the ship that had first received the Calrian distress call, walked through the streets with wonder. Calrian citizens stopped to bow or touch their foreheads in a gesture of deep respect whenever they saw a human. Children followed the Earth visitors at a distance, whispering excitedly among themselves. "It's hard to believe this is the same place we saw in those first transmissions," Alan said to Captain Wells, who walked beside him. Wells nodded, his eyes taking in the mixture of destruction and renewal around them. "They're rebuilding faster than I expected. Resilient people." They turned a corner and entered a large circular plaza that had been decorated with both Calrian and human symbols. A platform stood at the center, where dignitaries from both species were gathering. The area was crowded with thousands of Calrians, all waiting for the ceremony to begin. Admiral Wilson stood on the platform alongside President Sanchez, who had made the journey from Earth for this historic occasion. Facing them was the Calrian High Council, led by High Counselor Zetran, an elder whose blue skin had faded to a pale azure with age. As Allen and Wells found their places among the Earth delegation, they noticed representatives from a dozen previously unknown alien species also in attendance. News of humanity's intervention had spread quickly across the nearby star systems, drawing observers from civilizations that had previously kept their distance from the Drenari conflict. Distinguished guests, honored heroes, citizens of Calrea. High Counselor Zetran began, his voice amplified across the plaza. Today we gather to formally mark the end of the war and the beginning of a new chapter for our people. The crowd fell silent as Zetran turned to face the human delegation directly. For generations we believed ourselves alone in our stance against tyranny. When the Drenari Empire began their conquest, we reached out, not knowing if anyone would answer. We sent our call into the darkness of space as our last hope. The old Calrian's voice grew stronger, filled with emotion. And from a world we had never contacted, from a species we had never met, came the answer we had prayed for. The humans came when no one else would, asking nothing in return. Zetran gestured toward the sky, where Earth ships still patrolled, alongside the rebuilt Calrean defense fleet. Look at what they risked for us, their ships, their warriors, their very future. They crossed vast distances not for conquest or resources, but simply because we needed help. President Sanchez stepped forward as Zetran finished. The human leader looked tired from the long journey but stood tall before the assembled crowd. High Counselor honored members of the Calrian people, he began, his words translated instantly for the audience. Earth did what any decent civilization should do when hearing a cry for help. We answered. Sanchez gestured to the human military personnel scattered throughout the crowd. Our soldiers fought not for glory or conquest, but for a simple principle: that no peaceful people should face destruction alone, that distance and difference do not matter when innocent lives are at stake. He turned to face the representatives. From the other alien civilizations, his expression serious. Let this day mark not just the end of a conflict, but the beginning of a new era. Earth no longer stands alone, nor will we allow others to stand alone in their hour of need. With these words, Sanchez and Zetran moved to a small table where an ornate document waited. Together they signed the first interstellar alliance in human history, a treaty of mutual defense and cooperation between Earth and Calrea. As they signed, a cheer rose from the crowd, growing until it echoed throughout the city. The other alien representatives watched with expressions ranging from approval to concern. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted in ways no one had anticipated. Far from the celebration, on a distant world shrouded in perpetual twilight, the Drenari Emperor received the final reports of his fleet's withdrawal from Calrian space. The massive throne room was silent as he read the terms his commanders had been forced to accept. Reparations for damage caused, return of all Calrian captives, and a binding agreement never to enter Calrian space again. These humans, the Emperor said, his 4 yellow eyes narrowed in thought. Show me what we know of them. His advisors activated a display showing images captured during the battle, Earth ships maneuvering with unexpected precision, human marines fighting with remarkable determination, weapons that had been designed and built in mere weeks, specifically to counter Drenari technology. They should not have prevailed, his military advisor stated. Their technology is less advanced than ours. Their fleet was smaller, yet they defeated our forces decisively. The Emperor studied the images in silence before speaking. We underestimated them. This was our first and final mistake in dealing with their kind. He rose from his throne, towering over his advisors. Issue a directive to all Imperial forces. Avoid human space. Do not provoke them further. We will rebuild our strength before considering any action against them or their new allies. For the first time in centuries, the expansionist Drenari Empire had been forced to retreat. The news spread quickly across the stars. Back on the Calrian homeworld, the formal ceremony had ended, and smaller celebrations filled the streets. Admiral Wilson found himself speaking with representatives from 3 different alien species, all asking similar questions about Earth and its people. Your ships moved in formations we've never seen, said a tall insect-like being. "How did you develop such tactics?" "Your warriors fought house to house against superior Draenari numbers," added another alien with translucent skin. "What drives humans to such efforts for strangers?" Wilson answered as best he could, explaining human history, Earth's many conflicts, and how those experiences had shaped their approach to warfare. But some concepts seemed difficult for the aliens to grasp, especially humanity's willingness to sacrifice for principles rather than just survival or gain. As evening fell, Captain Wells found Dr. Morris on an observation deck overlooking the city. Below them, human and Calrian citizens mingled freely in the streets, sharing food, drinks, and stories despite their differences. "Quite a view," Wells said, joining his xenolinguist by the railing. Morris nodded, watching the scenes below with a thoughtful expression. "We came here as an unknown species," he said quietly. "We're leaving as the race that answered when called." Wells smiled slightly. "And the galaxy now knows. Threaten the innocent, and Earth will answer with fury." The two stood in comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the Calrian sky. Among them, barely visible at this distance, was the sun that warmed Earth, a world that had extended its protection farther than anyone had thought possible. In the days that followed, ships from a dozen worlds arrived at Earth, bearing ambassadors eager to establish relations with humanity. The message had spread quickly across the stars. A new power had emerged, one that fought not for conquest but for justice. Humanity had announced its arrival on the galactic stage not with words, but with actions that would echo across civilizations. For generations to come, Earth had answered the call, and the universe had noticed.